Well, hello, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Our next trolley stop is here, and our next trolley stop is now. Welcome back to another all-new episode. Little Forrest is right on cue of episode number 29 of PR from the Heart's Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. That means we have precisely reached the 29th trolley stop here at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. My name is John Masiulionis, along with my co-host each and every month. He joins me on this voyage that has now been approaching 30 episodes. You remember him and you love him as the beloved Mr. McFeely on the popular long-running children's television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. We know him and we love him as David Newell. David, it is hard to believe, and here's a play on words, but we're now entering into the dog days of summer, and we're literally just on the cusp of little ones hearing the school bell ring and heading back to school. So I hope that you have been enjoying the rest of your summer, and it is great to reconnect back with you in the process.
Yes, I had a nice visit with some grandchildren, and they're heading back to school in about 3 weeks. So they were here in Pittsburgh, where I live, as you know, and they were visiting. So they're anxious in a way to get back to school, and I think their parents are too. Anxious for them to get back to school.
I can definitely concur on that. There are no doubt parents across the country that are really looking forward to their little ones getting back into the classrooms. But of course, we still have a little bit of the summer left to go. But then we're going to be shifting into not only the back to school season, but PR from the Heart's back to school season specifically as well too. So if you are new to the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, David and I, for 2.5+ years now, we have taken the time, and we still continue to do so, to be able to, as a little tip of the cap to his character, Mr. McFeely on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we take the time to deliver the newest heartfelt reviews from some of the top new children's books that are available on the market, from authors who are self-published, authors who are published, and most importantly, providing these as resources of care for parents, caregivers, grandparents, educators, because David, especially as we're almost at the start of the back to school season and the holiday season, statistically speaking, these are the 2 times of the year, back to school season almost, and holiday season, where parents, caregivers, grandparents, and educators will purchase children's books and be looking for resources, even if they're not necessarily looking to purchase books, if they're looking to order new books into their libraries, for example, as well too. So I'm really looking forward to our bookcast here today, because the theme of which is really beautiful and really special. So as we tend to celebrate the dog days of summer and look ahead to the back to school season, 2 things ring true, 2 of the big F's in our lives. One is family, and the other is food. And when we can take the time together, I guess if this were the math lesson on the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, family plus food equals fun. So that's a little mathematical equation for all of you scoring at home in the process. But before we get into the titles of the bookcast, if you are new to the program, or if you are a return neighbor to our neighborhood here at PR from the Heart and the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, one of the many ways that you can pledge your support for us here at PR from the Heart and the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, if you haven't had the chance to do so already, is to subscribe to our official YouTube channel and to share this very special trolley stop that you are now enjoying. David, since the last time we had the opportunities to connect, we are now 5,000 plus subscribers strong at our official YouTube channel, and each one of these episodes continues to reach more parents and caregivers and grandparents and educators. So it's obviously taken some time to get to this particular point, but I know that you're excited. I'm excited as well too. So we're going to as we always like to do, we start at the top, the forefront, and the onset. And I'm really excited also, especially on this edition of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, because one of our favorite neighbors, we've had the opportunities here at PR from the Heart to be able to work with truly some of the shining stars in the world of for the past 9 years, and someone who stands head and shoulders above the rest in his work is John Parra. Of course, he is one of the top award-winning children's authors and illustrators in the world of children's literature, and he has his brand new, beautifully illustrated children's book that is penned by Michael Genhart and published by our friends and neighbors at Holiday House Books, and that is entitled Spanish is the Language of My Family. Now, I know, David, that you had the opportunities to kind of brush up on your Spanish because this book does interweave some Spanish and English in the process, but it is a really sweet story that talks about such subjects as family ties and cultural pride, and really on a deep level and bringing generations together. So this is how we're going to be starting off episode number 29 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. So let's dive into the pages of Michael Genhart and John Parra's Spanish is the Language of My Family, David.
Okay, well, before we get into the story, I think, well, two things. One is at the end of the book, the Spanish alphabet is shown, and that's very helpful. You can relate to that, and you'll see as we talk about the book. I didn't know this, that not until 1968, when the Bilingual Education Act was passed, Spanish children, to my knowledge, were not allowed to use Spanish in the public schools. Did I interpret that correctly?
There was a lot of suppression that those who spoke Spanish had to endure and to face, which is evident through the abuela character in Spanish is the Language of My Family, as she shares with her grandson in the process in the story.
But the Act of 1968 said that bilingual should be taught English along with encouraging whatever native language they're speaking.
Correct.
So that is a very speedy explanation of that act. I mean, it's much more complicated than that, but that's the overview of it, and that's what this book, I think, is referring to in a way. Well, the book begins with a young student whose name is Manolo, and he's telling the reader that every year there is a spelling bee in Spanish. So he's deciding he's going to sign up to be in the spelling bee. And on the next few pages, the student, who is Manolo, says that he already knows how to spell many words, and he gives some examples. For instance, familia, I think that is family. Did I say that right? Familia is family.
Plus, David.
And then he spells it out. And this is what the author is, and this helps the reader. F-A-M-I-L-I-A. And then he says there's the word for together,
which is juntos.
Juntos. That's the word for, and he spells that out too. And then there's the Spanish word for heart, and that is spelled out too. All of these are on the book. And as you're reading the book, or an adult reading a book to a child could reemphasize that. Now, what's the word for? It's very well constructed, I think, that allows to teach some words as you're reading along. I learned something, so if I'm going to learn something, I think a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old might learn the word too. So, and anyhow, that's how it's structured. And now, but he says he doesn't know how to spell some words yet, but his grandmother, which in Spanish is abuela.
That is correct.
That's how you say grandmother, abuela, and helps him, and they review each word. So his grandmother, his abuela, has been a great help to him, and they review the Spanish words for beautiful, proud, and strong. Again, each word is carefully spelled out in Spanish, and you can see that as you read through the book. And as I was reading through the book, I was thinking that's a wonderful way to introduce children to Spanish words and the spelling, especially with positive words like beautiful, strong, and proud. When Manolo was studying with his grandmother, she shared stories with him when she was a little girl they could only speak English. No Spanish was to be spoken. And in the book, the grandmother's words are written in Spanish. Oh, and Manola said it was hard to believe not being able to speak in Spanish. And the grandmother said, well, yes. And on the playground, when children were caught speaking Spanish, they would get in trouble and were punished. And the grandmother said she was sent home one time for speaking Spanish in the playground, and his aunt was spanked for speaking Spanish. And a good friend of the grandmother's was taken to the bathroom and her mouth washed out with soap. All of this for speaking Spanish. So I can see where that bilingual act of 1986 was put through. At any rate, that's the gist of the book, and I think it's the author is relating to this and saying, how could this have happened? And here's where we are now. At any rate, then because of all those stories we just heard about mouth being washed out from soap and all of that, the Spanish words for ugly, bad, and dirty are introduced. And Manola says, my grandmother and my family were not any of those words. Our language is not bad, not malo, not malo meaning not bad. I believe the Spanish word for bad, not M-A-L-O. And of course, that's in the text. You can see that and practice that word. Manola says that he's even working harder with his grandmother to learn various words and remember the accents too. And the word for why in Spanish is, if I'm getting this correct, porque.
Yes.
Did I get that sort of right? I did it. And then Dano is harm. D-A-N-O is harm.
Daño. So when you have the little tilde, that's what it's called, is the tilde over the N. You get,
yes.
So like when there's the weather pattern called El Nino, it's the N-I-N-O, so it's daño, I believe.
Daño is harm. Well, I can see that too. Harm and and he's studying other words and studying very hard because he's got to win this spelling bee. Well, he certainly has confidence, and that's a lesson in the book too. If you know your subject well, and he's practicing his words and practicing his accent, and working hard to learn the subject. And as you learn your subject, your confidence grows. And I think that's a little lesson in the book, to be able to work hard to know your subject, and therefore you have your confidence.
Agreed.
So he's building up his confidence by learning the words and studying and working with his grandmother and so forth. He says to himself, I'm climbing a high mountain. I know I can reach the top. I can win this spelling bee. And that's certainly confidence that I think something is going to help him to that mountaintop. Anyhow, he says, but studying his words are not easy. To help with his frustration, his grandmother makes him some churros. Is that right? Churros? Sounds like they're biscuits or cooked churros. Did I get that right? Churros?
I always see them like at fairs and carnivals. And
yes.
They're like little cinnamon flavored desserts, if I'm not mistaken, David.
They're supposed to be delicious. And to help him along with his confidence, his parents tell him jokes and they keep encouraging him. Mm-hmm. And the Spanish words for delicious, laugh, and support are introduced, giving the reader some practice in pronunciation. You'll see that in the text. And I think we'll leave that to the people who read the book to pronounce all of those. But it's interesting, as you go through, you get some of the words that relate back to the theme of the book, too. If I just made sense. At any rate, on the day of the contest, here we are, the family gathers to cheer him on. The cheers give me confidence, he says, and that phrase is also used in Spanish. Each contestant is called to spell some of the words he was studying with his grandmother. And his first word, which I'll spell out, is Poderoso, and that means powerful in Spanish, just like my grandmother. Then my grandmother is powerful, and that is shown in Spanish. So that's a connection to that word is powerful, which his grandmother is. That's how things relate back to the story. It goes all through the book that way, I think. The words relate to the theme of the book. That's what I'm trying to say, I think. Oh, okay, that's another quick lesson. Oh, and he feels proud, beautiful, and strong, just like his grandmother. And he's doing well. So far, so good. And word after word, he's spelling correctly. And then it's down to 2 contestants. And the word is Verguenza.
I believe that is pronounced vergüenza. Vergüenza.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that was the word that they had to spell. But both he and his classmate misspelled the word. So the tension is brewing here. And then only one more word to go. And they start again. And if he spells it correctly, he wins the spelling bee. The word is Respeto.
And I believe,
and he spells it.
And I believe that is pronounced respeto.
Very good. I couldn't do that. Say that again.
And so I believe it's
say it one more.
I believe it's pronounced respeto.
Okay. Well, that is the word that he had to spell. And the judge then says correcto. Can you say that in Spanish? Well, correcto is sort of humorous. Or is that also Spanish for correct?
You got
correcto.
It. You got it. Correct. Correcto is correct.
Correcto is correct. Well, that's what the judge says, and his family cheers. And his grandmother is crying because, she's helped him through all of this. With her power, she's got him to the point where he is now. And he says at the moment, I know we both won today. And his grandmother hugs him and congratulates him in Spanish. And then at the very end of the book, I thought the words were wonderful. Full of pride, he hugs and thanks her very much. And here's the last page. It has the class celebrating the words triumphant and healing, and they're shown in Spanish. But the last line is amor is love. That's how the book ends.
Perfecto.
Amor is correct.
Perfecto, and that means perfect.
Oh, well, as you can tell, I don't speak Spanish, although my wife is a Spanish, she speaks fluently. And she's been helping with some of these words. But my point of the book is you don't have to know Spanish, but I think it's a good way to help introduce children to the Spanish language and to show beyond that there's English, yes, but there are so many other languages, and Spanish is one of them. And I think years from now, the most popular language in this country, or one of them, is going to be Spanish. It's really growing and growing. So I think it's a wonderful book to introduce to children. And again, it has the title, I believe, is Amor is Love. And then I think the subtitle is Spanish is the language of my family, right?
Spanish is the language of my family. Amor is the concluding portion of the book. And then, of course, we're connecting with the overall title of the book, Spanish is the language of my family. What I wanted to mention, Dave, and thank you for taking us inside the pages of Spanish is the language of my family. There's such in it. This book definitely has both light and dark. And it's shared in a very, like, whenever you talk about something that happened in history, you really can't sugarcoat it. You have to tell it for what it is. And one of the things that I really give Michael a lot of credit for, as well as the team at Holiday House who published the book, at the very end of the book, there's a note from the author. And Michael shares, when I was a child, my mother would tell me about not being able to speak her first language, Spanish, in public school in Southern California. She would tearfully point out how she and fellow students were humiliated and punished for speaking Spanish, although they naturally continued to use Spanish at home. So this message hit home for Michael. His mom had experienced undoubtedly some trauma and some difficult times. And he's doing his part to be able to let children know, especially Latino children, Hispanic speaking children, that there's nothing to be ashamed of. That Spanish is not only just a language, but it's a beautiful way to be able to communicate. So if you go, like, for example, to the end of the book, when you have that beautiful heart spread with a little bumblebee that John beautifully illustrates, as you shared, triunfante is triumphant.
Yes.
Sanacion, I believe is how it's pronounced, is healing, and amor is love. And if you see at the very end, and you talked about it, after little Manolo, he wins his gold medal for winning the National Spanish Spelling Bee. You have all of his students, fellow competitors, all the little ones that are surrounding him, and it's like they're cheering him on. So there's this message, as you talked about.
Yes.
There's the messages about confidence and even persistence in the midst of learning something new and perfecting your craft. So there's those messages. And then I also really liked how you talked about the fact that, Michael and John take the time to clarify what the words are. So when parents and educators are taking the time to read the book to the little ones, for example, the word is vergüenza, and it spells it out, Verguenza. Then parents and educators can sit with their little one and say, okay, this is how you spell, so kids can not only learn Spanish, they can learn spelling as well too, and then they can learn the meanings of the words. I know that, I landed up taking many years of Spanish in high school and college. I've unfortunately forgotten the majority of it. But when little ones are learning a new language, because their minds are just developing, it's important to not overwhelm them, right? So you introduce them, like, this word means this, like libro means book, or abuela means grandmother. So I really love how Michael and John are taking the time to be able to do that. And David, I think, and you've known this for, again, the past 2.5 years we've been doing these Bookcast episodes, anytime that there is a story that is a heartfelt bond between grandmother and grandson, we've had the chance to share several books over the past 2.5 years on the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast that really talk about that bond. There's something about that grandparent to grandchild bond. And you can even speak on behalf of that, because as you said, when we started off the Bookcast, you spend some time, for nearly 2 weeks just being with your grandkids. And there's so many great things that happen during that time. And then there's also not only those memories that are made, but those lessons, the wisdom that you and other grandparents are passing down to their grandchildren that undoubtedly your grandchildren will pick up on, and they will definitely not forget.
That's right. And that's what happened with my grandfather. He's the one who introduced me to theater and to films at a very early age. And my parents supported it, but my grandfather was actually the one who would take me every Saturday to a different play or a movie and really encourage my participation and going to some acting classes too. All of that was my grandfather. And so this book does ring home, but also the book, I think, brings up a curiosity for children in other languages. I think as you read through it, I hope it instills a curiosity in children. Oh, there's other ways of speaking just besides English.
Correct.
Or there's Spanish, and it applies to any language. Spanish is used in this way, but this story you could put Italian, you could put French, you could put anything into it, and it's just a respect for others and respect for language, and I think that's in the book too, a respect for different people's way of life and of communicating.
I agree.
So there's a lot in that book. There's a lot in there.
There's so many messages, and again, this is why one of the best things about children's books such as Spanish is the Language of My Family, you can go back to reading it over and over again, and maybe the first time you just talk about with your little one or with your student, depending upon if you're a parent or an educator or a grandparent or a caregiver, and you can just focus on one specific theme, and then you can go back to the book, and then you can go back and talk about another one, because as we just talked about, little ones can get very excited. If you try to talk about 5 or 6 things at one time, they might kind of lose track and lose sense. So maybe to take the time, if we gave a little bit of a recommendation while enjoying Spanish is the Language of My Family, take the time to savor the book and to not necessarily rush it, and to allow your little one to be able to process the story and the messages as they learn it. And just a little did you know, David, now many people are familiar with, I believe it's the Scripps National Spelling Bee that happens every single year, but did you know that there is actually a National Spanish Spelling Bee that takes place every year? And I believe it just recently passed.
Oh, I didn't know.
It was in the beautiful city of El Paso, Texas, as well too. So again, little ones can learn about the fact that, again, that there's another, that the English speaking spelling bee tends to get a lot of the press and the PR and the publicity every year, but there is also this amazing event that takes place in El Paso, Texas. So again, this has been Spanish is the Language of My Family, written by Michael Genhart, illustrated by John Parra, and published by our friends and neighbors at Holiday House Books. So again, we encourage all of you, our listeners and viewers, our friends and neighbors, and of course our fellow shining stars, you can head on over to Amazon.com if that's your preferred online vehicle of your choosing, or you can head over to any major bookstore across this beautiful country of ours, or your favorite children's or independent bookstore. You can purchase your copy of Spanish is the Language of My Family. One of the many ways you can pledge your support for Michael and John to let them know that they're doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, and educators is to leave a 5-star review for Spanish is the Language of My Family. But of course, if you head on over to your local library, if you don't see your copy of Spanish is the Language of My Family, make the suggestion to the children's librarian in the children's department. This would be a great book to be able to stock, especially for the back to school season and especially for the holiday season. So David, we talk about savoring books, and I know it's interesting because I'll mention a little thing about my grandfather. My grandfather's favorite food of choice that he regularly enjoyed was grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. And I remember my grandfather would take an hour. He would take an hour to eat lunch. And I would ask him, and I'm part Polish. So again, that's jaja, which is, Polish. Grandfather means, or grandfather in Polish is jaja. And I would say, Jaja, why are you taking so long to eat your food? And he would say, John, I'm savoring my food. So we shift from the theme of family to bringing in the food element. And this leads us into our second and final book for episode number 29 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. Of course, the trolley, by the way, just as an FYI, where are our manners? We traveled from San Diego to Pittsburgh to pick you up, David, and then we headed over to San Francisco, California, which is where Michael is located. And then we go back across the country to where John Parr is located in the beautiful area of Jamaica, Queens, New York. So we're racking up a lot of mileage, and the trolley's getting some international mileage as we're traveling to the beautiful country of Canada. We are now going to be diving into the pages of Sandy Mack's debut children's book. I love this book on so many levels, David. It's titled What's for Breakfast? courtesy of our friends and neighbors at Miriam Laundry Publishing. They do great work with regards to children's authors and have for many years. And this is one of the most adorable stories, David. You know, we're in the process of celebrating the 9-year anniversary of PR from the Heart and doing publicity work for children's authors. This is truly one of the sweetest stories that I've had the chance to read, and one of the most enjoyable stories that we'll now have the chance to talk about and review in the 2.5 years that we've been doing the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. So take us inside the pages of Sandy Mac's What's for Breakfast.
Okay, well, it begins with Willie is a boy who loves to eat breakfast. And the first 2 pages of the book shows Willie getting dressed in the morning, singing about everything he likes for breakfast. And he seems to sing a lot in the book. And for instance, he says, I like to eat cereal, and he sings that, and I like to eat toast, I like oatmeal, I like muffins, I like bagels, etc., etc. And he's singing all of that. And he dashes downstairs, and he probably sings, what's for breakfast? But his mother says, buttered raisin toast. And Willie seems a little disappointed in buttered raisin toast. But can't we make an omelet today, he says. His mother said, sure, Willie. We have lots of eggs for omelets. Willie burst into song. I get to eat omelets, he sang. And if I'll help you, Mama. Now, Willie, get the carton of eggs and the cheese and the pepper and some chopped kale from the refrigerator. That's his assignment. His mama says, get all of that out of the refrigerator. He does. Brings it over the table. See, Mama, I'm a big help. And Willie continues to sing. And then I like the repetition of these words. Ruff, ruff, ruff. He sang to his dog, Sparky, as he tossed Sparky a piece of cheese that he brought from the fridge. Get the frying pan, Willie. It's in the pantry. What else? Said Willie. Well, we need some oil so the eggs don't stick, says Mom. And Willie found the oil, and he helped his mom pour the oil into the frying pan. And then here we go. Drip, drip, drip. Willie sings. And then he picks up one egg, and we go tap, tap, tap on the kitchen counter. Then crackle, 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 as he opened the eggshell with his finger. Oh, Mama, I dropped some eggshells in the mixing bowl. And his mom says, don't worry, I do that sometimes. It all takes practice. And here's the little lesson starts. Practice makes perfect, as I think they say later on. Yep. Then back to the words. Scoop, scoop, scoop. I got one piece of the shell out of the mixture. And Willie picks up another egg, and he goes tap, tap, tap. Crackle, 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 eggs into the bowl. Then Sparky is at it again. He jumped up and he tugged on Willie's sock. And, oh no, Sparky, no. It made him drop the egg on the floor. Well, Sparky was sent over to his bed, and Willie cleaned the egg up from the floor. But he says, now, look what you've done, Sparky. Now I have to start all over again. So he gets another egg, and he proceeds to start over. And here goes the words. And the reader can do this with children. What do we say now? Tap, tap, tap. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Scoop, scoop, scoop. Oh, and I only dropped a small piece of eggshell this time in the bowl. Well, then Mom says, and practice makes perfect. And take your time and you will get it. Now there's another lesson. It's good to be able to take your time. And that's a lesson that Fred Rogers uses a lot too. If you want to do something, if you want to ride a bicycle and ride it straight and tall, you simply can't look at it because it won't move at all. But it's you who've got to do it, and you who've got to fall sometimes if you want to ride a bicycle. Again, that's what this is saying. Take your time and you will get it. So there's a lesson. And then he says, well, what's next, Mama? Now we combine the eggs together, and that means mix and stir. So here we go. Stir, stir, stir. And I like to think that each time that Willie is doing these stir, 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 crack, 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 plump, 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 whatever, that he's singing all of that. And you could, anyhow, you could have the child you're reading it to or the child themselves singing. Now, here's the next step. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. He sprinkles in the shredded cheese and then the pepper and the kale. The kale being the healthy ingredient here, goes into the omelet. Mama gave him some advice. Now, Willie, there's a lot of cheese there. And Willie says, I like cheese. So Mama's, I guess, is saying, okay, this is your job. You're learning. And then mix, mix, mix. And here's a lesson for the readers, I think, too. Willie watched as his mother adjusted the temperature on the stove, which I think is good that is pointed out, that adults need to control the temperature and the stove and the gas light and so forth. But she let Willie pour the mixture of eggs and pepper and cheese into the frying pan. Then, rough, Sparky's at it again. Sparky manages to grab the egg flipper. How he did that, I don't know, but he got it off the counter and ran off with it. I think that the temptation of egg on the flipper got Sparky all excited. But his mother said, oh, don't worry, here's a clean one. And Willie asked if he can flip it. No, not yet. It hasn't quite solidified, or it hasn't settled is probably the easier word to understand. But Willie was a bit anxious and didn't listen to his mother and flipped under the eggs. Then they weren't quite ready and they crumbled. Willie said, Mama, it's falling apart. Oh, just wait another minute. Wait, don't rush things, Mama is saying. This is a lesson. It's good to be able to wait. Willie was breathing in and out, and in the book they show Willie waiting. Mm-hmm. And that's good to show. It's so tempting to go jumping into everything, but take your time and wait. And Willie's breathing in, he's breathing out, and he's waiting for the eggs to get just right. And his mother says, now, let's flip the omelet together. Flip, flip, flip. Perfect, said Willie. Sniff, sniff, sniff. Willie loved the smell of fried eggs. We did it. And then, of course, they're going to eat it. Scoop, scoop, scoop. And they scooped the omelet onto a plate and took it to the dining room table. And here we go. 1 bite, yum. 2 bites, yum, yum. And 3 bites, yum, yum, yum. And the omelet was gone. And Willie said, I love to eat, eat, eat. And on the last page it says, you know what, Mama? Now I love to cook, cook, cook. And that is the story of Willie learning to make, I guess, a scrambled egg now. But that is a delightful little story, I think.
There's as we touched upon, like there's my inner child is just beaming as the result of reading this book, because of course, first off, we obviously see the little furry friend Sparky, and so when I was actually enjoying What's for Breakfast, I was reading it along with little Forrest, and I said, Forrest, look, there's a little guy that's in this book as well too. So he was able to connect with the book right off the bat, which is fantastic. There's that interactive quality, so like kids really love to be engaged. So when you're reading the book to your little one and you can imitate Sparky saying ruff, 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 or you can have, what are one of the other ones? When you're cracking the eggs, the crackle, crackle, crackle. Like kids really, especially really young ones, they connect to those words and those sound effects where you can, connect
yes.
the words with a little bit
I think that
too.
That's the fun of the book, I think.
Yes. And it's
the repetition of those words.
Yes, and also the fact that there's, to the best of my knowledge, and there's probably books that talk about, breakfast for kids, but this is really the first one that's come into my awareness on my end of things. So as you mentioned, it, teaches, there's the lesson about introducing your kids to the importance of breakfast. teaching your kids how to cook, but really some of those truly fundamental life lessons about taking your time. And I love how I think on the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood album that I have here in my office, there's a song that he sang about time, like I love to take my time or something along the lines of that, and being patient. So these are things, as you said, kids can be very rambunctious. They want to jump into everything, and to just take the time and really just enjoy and savor the whole process. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the lesson too, is the discipline, that it's a discipline of sorts, to be able to follow directions and take your time and to do things right. And it's a lovely little book, and you can, as you said earlier, you can go back and read it again and emphasize maybe the rough, or the sweep, or the chunk, whatever, and play around with those words. And it's also playing with words too, and playing with sounds, I think, for young children.
And we also want to take the time to acknowledge Sandy in the creation of this book, and to be able to give a little shout out to her son Tyson. So I can only imagine that the interaction that she had with her son no doubtedly provide a spark of creativity for the creation of What's for Breakfast. Sandy is not only a Canadian children's author, but she's also a certified early childhood supervisor with more than 20 years of experience in the field. So she brings that extra added element of not only being a mom, but also working in the field of early childhood education as well too. So we encourage all of you, our listeners and viewers, if you're hungry, raise your hand. We see David's hand up and my hand up. We're hungry after reading and enjoying What's for Breakfast. We encourage you to head on over to Sandy's official website, which is sandymaclittlenonesbeginnings.com. You can also head on over to Amazon.com if that's your preferred online vehicle of your choosing. You can leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the many ways you can pledge your support for Sandy, to let her know that she's doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books. You can also head on over to your local library or your children's or your favorite local children's or independent bookstore. If they do not actually stock or have a copy or copies of What's for Breakfast, make that kind suggestion. This is one of the things we really love about the Bookcast, is that there's a lot of books that are out in the market that many people have not heard of. Parents, caregivers, grandparents, and educators, and it's really up to us, and we've been doing our part for the past 2.5 years, and we're continuing to do this moving forth into the back to school season and into the holiday season, to let people know that these books are available, and that they're not only available, but that they're truly trusted resources for your little ones. So David, when we hear the trolley, we mean that's basically the cue that we need to wrap, that it's time to go, so to speak. So again, we encourage you. This has been a great Bookcast, episode number 29. Raise your hand if you have had fun on episode number 29 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. We see hands from myself on screen. We see David's hands on screen as well too. We see hands from the little ones as well. And I'd like to say that means mission accomplished, job well done. Again, you can purchase your copies of Spanish is the Language of My Family and What's for Breakfast. They're both now available. You can head on over to Amazon.com if that's your preferred online vehicle of your choosing. Leave 5-star reviews for both books in the process. You can head on over to your favorite children's or independent bookstore, your favorite local library. If you see the copy there, fantastic. If you don't see it, make that kind suggestion. Make a little note about that as well too. There are many more magical trolley stops to come here on the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast as part of our back to school season and our holiday season. So if you are a children's author and you would love for David and I to be able to review your brand new children's book on a forthcoming edition of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, you know where to connect with us via our official website, prfromtheheart.com, or any of our social media platforms that you now see on screen. Facebook and Instagram, and I believe thanks to Elon Musk, Twitter in some form still exists, but it's now called X. if I'm not mistaken. That might take some time for us to get used to saying here in the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, but you know where to connect with us on social media, all at PR from the Heart. And of course, to all of the children's authors that are out there that are doing their part to share their messages, if you are feeling that you need dedicated PR support to be able to get your message out to more parents and caregivers and grandparents and educators for the back to school season and the holiday season, and sooner than we know it, 2024 is going to be around, you can again connect with us via our official website, prfromtheheart.com. Schedule your courtesy connection call and let us see how we can be of service to you. David, I'm looking forward to seeing you once again very soon, because very soon the trolley will be traveling in real life, in real time, once again, back from San Diego all the way over to Pittsburgh. We're going to be spending some time very shortly once again with our friends and neighbors at the Center for Media Innovation in downtown Pittsburgh for another special installment, another in-studio episode of PR from the Heart's Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. So stay tuned, stay connected with our future trolley stops. And most importantly, if you've missed any of our past trolley stops, we have had now 28 of these, David, if I'm not mistaken. So there's many books. If you haven't had the chance to watch the Bookcast, again, this is the first time that you've been enjoying this program, you can enjoy any of our other previous episodes over the past 2.5 years and see how David and I have grown together. And you can really connect to more heartfelt messages, more empowering reads for kids that are truly some of the best on the market as of right now. Again, one final time, the books Spanish is the Language of My Family, written by Michael Genhart and illustrated by John Parra, and Sandy Mack, What's for Breakfast. They're both now available. You can head on over to Amazon.com, leave 5-star reviews for both books. And of course, you can head over to your favorite children's or independent bookstore, your favorite local library. If you don't see the book on the shelf, make that kind suggestion to be able to have the librarian, the bookstore owner, the clerk to be able to place that order for Spanish is the Language of My Family and What's for Breakfast. And again, we want to thank all of you, of course, because without you, there would be no us. We want to thank you for your continued support of PR from the Heart, for your continued support of children's authors. Actually, let me stand corrected. We want to thank you for your continued support of PR from the Heart and the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. In addition to your continued support of children's authors and illustrators such as Michael Genhart, John Parra, and Sandy Mack that are doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books, for truly the pillars of our community. For local libraries and children's and independent bookstores, they really are the pillars of our community. But above all else, we want to thank you for helping us to walk home the children of the world, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. So little Forrest has actually been very quiet for this episode, by the way. He has been enjoying both of these books. Little Forrest has given 2 paws up for Spanish is the Language of My Family and What's for Breakfast. So for little Forrest, for David Newell, for myself, John Masiulionis, thank you for spending some time with us here during our summer reading season at PR from the Heart, and we look forward to spending some time with you very soon as part of our back to school season at PR from the Heart and the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. Thank you for helping us to walk home the children of the world once again, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.